G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic Friday leading into a fantastic weekend. Another week done. Now of course today, as always, we do have a lot to talk about. So we're going to look at the maps. Of course, in the maps we're going to have a zoom in and look specifically at Kursk in the north and Pokrovsk in the east and Krasnoyarivka just south of there and talk about what is changing in there. We'll also look at some geolocations to try and get a better idea of where some things are moving, even if the maps don't reflect some of this, and of course across different maps. Also, we need to look at long-range strikes from the US, the UK, all those weapon systems being used so Ukraine can conduct longer range, deeper missile strikes into Russia. We'll also look at what the potential Vice President JD Vance has said about the war in Ukraine and where that could end. We need to look at aircraft and planes, and then I want to talk at length about wheat, grain, exports, link that in with a ship that we have seen hit by Russia and the future and where some of Russia's industrial capacity and where some of maybe their hybrid future warfare is looking in other areas of the globe too. But of course, you conduct this strategic level hybrid warfare and conventional warfare all to benefit your state and interest. So we'll look at that at length. I think you might find that interesting. That'll be at the end of the video. So look, it's been a rough day for a fighter aircraft, but we have a lot of fighter aircraft news. Now, those of you who know, I like fighter aircraft, whether it is an F-16, F-18, Su-57, Su-30, they're bloody cool. And if you're wherever you are in the world wanting to join the Defence Force or the armed forces, depending on what your country has, you know, you can just study hard at school and go and fly a $50 to $100 million plane. I wish I thought about that more when I was at school. You could literally be a Formula One driver, but flying a fighter jet. That's sick. But let's have a look at a couple of planes. So here we have, out in the Black Sea, near some oil and gas, not oil and gas platforms here, a Ukrainian special operations mission here conducted in small boats. Now we see here, which is a Russian Su-30 SM, which is like a naval variant of a Russian Su-30 aircraft. So then we see it flying around here. Now some have said, why is this so close? Why would it be here? Well, this would be conducting, I believe, close air support, trying to hit that ground targets with potentially its main gun, so it will be far closer. Now what we see here looks like a man-pad missile being fired off one of the boats, being reported as a man-pad, a man-portable air defense weapon system, something like, say, a Stinger. And then we see some level of impact here, we believe, and this is being reported as that is then the plane going down. Again, the footage isn't super clear of this. Ukrainian sources saying SF team, manpad, took down the plane. We know a Su-30 SM did go down yesterday, and that does line up. Although, of course, with everything this war, there's a lot of questions around what actually happened. And Fighter Bomber, who is very reliable when it comes to things like this, he has also speculated a little bit about this. The video shows a plane flying. There's no sign of being shot down, which of course will not stop the Ukrainians from reporting the plane shot down and getting some cash for it. This is common practice in our country too. So as we know, both Ukraine and Russia, there are certain sums of money that can be received for hitting some certain items. You know, in Russia, there's a lot of that. I did see a meme that said, if a Patriot did shoot down an F-16, do you think the Patriot operators can claim the money, I think it was 5 million rubles that the Russians were putting forward for a downed F-16? But at the moment, there is no understanding of the causes of the crash. Understanding will come after the inspection of the wreckage, the flight recorder, the objective control from the plane and the State Commission. The search for the crew continues. So at this point, if you're over the sea, crew being down, realistically, if the crew hasn't been recovered by the Ukrainian team that was there, or the Russians at this point in the water, in the sea for a long time, probably suffered the worst fate here, but more will come on that, I am sure. Now, I occasionally have a look and see if United Aircraft Company, UAC, because they post when they have new aircraft come off the line. And we do see a video today here showing then 2 Russian Su-57. So they all, and these are Russia's most modern aircraft here. So in the footage, I always watch the footage of this because they will say a batch. They'll never really give a specific number, but in the footage, well, you can just count. So in the footage here, it does show 2 brand new Su-57 Gen 4++ or Gen 5 aircraft. Again, no one has had their hands on this to bloody tell. There's an amount of speculation by people online. Again, without those with their hands on it, it's hard to know exactly the level of sophistication of this aircraft. But we do know Russia has it in very, very small numbers. Has it participated in the war? Yes, we believe so, because both Ukrainian and Russian accounts are reporting this. How much effect has it had? Again, very difficult to actually then know. But we have seen one was heavily damaged or destroyed by a drone as well on the tarmac. But UAC has delivered a new batch of Su-57 and Su-35S aircraft to the Russian aerospace forces. The video released and the photographs does not show any Su-35Ss. 5th gen fighters were accepted by the technical staff, underwent a full cycle of factory tests, and were tested in various operating models by pilots of the Russian Ministry of Defense. The planes flew to their home airfield. So saying here that delivering new batch of these aircraft, we know that UAC are trying to increase the production through the state of then aircraft too, and we have seen increased production primarily actually in Su-34 as well. Now again, is this meeting replacement? Again, it's impossible to know because we don't have clear numbers of how many have ever been shot down. We don't have clear numbers on the amount that are being produced either. But again, as time goes on, we may get a more clear idea. So let's have a look at the maps. Of course, here is Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv, the red areas occupied since 2022, the purple since 2024, the green and blue is area within Ukraine's borders that Ukraine has recovered since then, or the blue in Kursk is area that Ukraine is occupying back into Russia on their Kursk offensive. Now, this map here doesn't show any changes in here today, but what a lot of accounts are reporting is that Ukraine has launched its counterattack to the counter-attacking Russian force, the counter-attack, if that makes sense. So the Ukrainians had their offensive, Russian countered it, and then now the Ukrainian forces are then countering that. But we do have another couple of maps we're going to look at and some footage in here as well. So when I speak about offensives, counter-offensives, counter-offensives, I think we just need to look at this, and bits like this are going to become more and more obvious of where we were right or wrong into the future and see how this unfolds in Kursk. But in then attritional warfare, the goal is to force the enemy to expend vital material and strategic reserves on strategically meaningless operations. A key pitfall is to avoid being dragged into the very same trap that has been set for the enemy. So you fall into the own trap that you have been set. Now, this is why I've said I think strategically the best move for the Russians would actually not be to launch a counter in here. Now, politically, that may be very difficult with the optics of how that looks of Ukraine occupying a certain amount of land. But the amount of troops and everything set up, this can be the same trap that Ukraine has tried to set for you of then drawing forces around. But again, you can fall into the same trap. Ukraine could fall into that trap with countering the counteroffensive again. How many counters do you think we can get at? But you can end up in that same trap. The Germans did that at Verdun. It was planned to use a surprise to capture key politically sensitive terrain, provoking costly French counterattacks. Unfortunately for the Germans, they fell into their own trap. They failed to gain key defendable terrain early on, and the battle developed instead into a series of costly infantry assaults by both sides with artillery devastating attacking infantry. And we saw the other day from that, I think it was Wall Street Journal, or maybe I think it was Wall Street Journal, was saying there's no real evidence that Ukraine is heavily defending this territory in here by digging in mass amount of engineering vehicles and staff in here. How will that go for long-term defense? Or could we see a withdrawal back out? And before we have a look at the maps, we talk about the counter, let's have a look. So at this geolocation just down in here, now this is not the easiest thing to see in the world, but we'll get a better idea. We move this across, we see where this then scoops up. So right down just about here, of where my cursor is right now. So see this slides down. Right in here, we have seen that Ukraine has then actually pushed across here as well by this footage. So we see then a Ukrainian engineering vehicle here with like a plow bulldozer on the front of it here, pushing through then these tank trap pyramids here, these dragon's teeth. And you can see that a T-series tank here looks to be actually bogged down behind here. Now, people are calling this out and whatever. At the end of the day, this engineering vehicle, this is just going to reverse up, they're already going to have this bloody cable just connected, wrap it over a shackle, and you're going to drag that thing, skull drag that straight out of here. But there is movement across through these Dragon's Teeth engineering vehicles and crossing again in an area of the Russian border. And will there something develop there? Again, we are not sure. But what we did think we'd see in this, that we did think we would see successive attacks follow up the initial large attack in here, and not that stop-start we keep talking about, that attacks need to be simultaneous and successive to have effect, to reintroduce maneuver warfare into an attritional warfare environment. Now, this is the Syriac map update straight off the bat, looking dramatically different to the deep state. The reason I bring the deep state up, satellite image, a bit easier to try and see where this is. But the Russian army continued its counteroffensive and recaptured several positions, including farms in Pokrovsk. So again, maybe they just like the name Pokrovsk to have areas taken back. But clashes with the Ukrainian army are taking place now at the outskirts of Lyubimovka and inside Tulsiti Lug. Now, this isn't the easiest to line up, but let's just zoom in. And what we sort of do is a bit of map to ground and go, well, where looks the same. So look, let's come in. I wish we could go a half one, but let's look at where the Snagost, then reservoirs are through here, and some of this open ground before Lyubimovka. So right in here, in these big paddocks here, this is where it says that the Russian forces are up to, and this is where this road runs through here. So this is really suggesting that the Russians are more so something, I believe, more like that in this area at the moment. I actually think that's a reasonable-ish drawing. So again, we'll wait and see more geolocations as well as different maps to get an idea. We jump onto then the Syriac. Now, he is showing more control being taken back by the Russians in these areas. Snagost is still shown under mostly of Ukrainian control. Different maps show different to this, but you can see the amount taken back here and where that their front line has actually then been pushed back. And you can see this is the exact area we spoke about. We saw that T-series tank and the engineering vehicle pushing across in this direction between Tyankyou to Gloshkovo, showing some fair expansion there. Again, we don't know, I don't know how far those vehicles ever went in. So that is more of an update here. Now, I can't show you this footage. It is on the Telegram if you'd like to see. But again, something that's going to become more and more critical just into the future of warfare, not future of warfare, now in warfare, is for infantry forces just the assumption that you are being watched all the time. Here we see a crossing across the same river, which of course splits this area down in here of a grouping of Russians here near a pontoon bridge, and then is hit by cluster warheads from a HIMARS. Now, the aftermath footage actually does show that a lot of guys seemed actually to survive that, be incredibly lucky, but there would have been large casualties there too. And why I bring that up is strategically, tactically now, there can be no assumption that just because you're in your camouflage hiding in a bush, that something can't see at your height, that a drone with thermal, with whatever, is not bloody watching you the entire time. So let's have a look at some other areas on the maps. Now, where we want to come down, we'll come down Donetsk first off, as this is where we have seen a major shift. So this will be easier if I give you an idea yesterday. So yesterday we saw then this Novelsky pocket here close. Now today we see just this movement to the west of Krasnohivka. Of course, this is Pokrovsk and Avdiivka to get you an idea. But according to a lot of other maps, this pocket in here has now closed today down near Hostre as well. So let me show you some of that. Now, we have a Ukrainian sources map here. Noel reports. So this is Krasnohivka. Krasnohivka, we see the reservoir sitting in here and Hirovkia. Now, what he is showing is a far more of a close-up in here across where my cursor is going in here. He's showing that pocket is really closing up. What he doesn't show is in Hostre here, which is where this grey zone, see where this grey zone then pushes right out in here, is that there was definitely some Russian presence down here. Now, should it be red? Well, presence doesn't exactly mean that it should be red, but we 100% know there was definitely presence here, and we'll show you Syriac in this area in a second. But there are footage here from the 46th firing at Russian positions in Hostre right here. Now, this is not great to see. I should have fixed up this map, but this blue pin drop right here is Hostre, and just all around this is where, at these different geolocations here, are then firing on Russians in here. So I believe firing on Russian positions in here, if their positions in here, probably should be red. And we have seen then that is what Salient has updated. So this is the same area in here. Now, Salient shows out to the west of Krasnoyarsk, fairly similar, but is showing where the grey zone is showing grey. He is showing that then it is red. And again, this pocket from Hirovka Hostry is closing up. Russian army made significant advance west of Krasnoyarsk following the withdrawal of Ukrainian army westwards, which is leading to the reduction of the salient here at the reservoir and this pond, and capture most of Hostry village. We've seen that footage, well, at least the geolocation of the footage that I showed you. EJ Shahid does a great job on Twitter of geolocations in there. Really good neutral too to find geolocations of both Russian and Ukrainian stuff. So you get a good overlook of where things can be moving. So yeah, I think this likely is red down to here and that this is closing up if we combine multiple different somewhat sources to get an idea in here. But let's have more of a look then at Ugledar. Now, the only changes we see today is more ground taken by Deep State in Horovka. Now, more and more people I'm seeing online are saying that Deep State is well behind in so many areas at the moment. A lot of people questioning why I use it, but we use it to line up with other maps and we will get an idea, because as things go forward, eventually things will start updating and changing. So this is down near Ukrainsk down in here, and of course this is Novorovka. Now I did say yesterday at Lysivka, the first Lysivka sort of northwest, because there's another one that sits right down in Ukrainsk, but the one up here, we did say Deep State yesterday actually showed more of a westerly push than Salient did. Now Salient is showing more closely to this. Now this Krasny Yar, Kruty Yar in here, the first one, just remember where that is in here before we read through as well. Russian bombardment allowed correct front line here, so where we said was a bit different. Krasny Yar is disputed, so up in here he's saying is disputed. Ukrainian incursions further south were repelled, so Ukraine pushing back down into here. So Kruty Yar is no man's land, and this area here is disputed. Sorry. Meanwhile, Russian army managed to consolidate eastern outskirts of Lysivka. In Ukrainsk, so down in the south, remember there's two Lysivkias, but I mean Lysivkia up in here. In Ukrainsk, Ukrainian army withdrew most of the city towards here, leaving its presence barely 15% of the locality, counting the Telecon. The remaining areas are being bombed by Russian forces. So down in here said that 15% is still under Ukrainian forces in here. Remember, we looked at a geolocation down in here by Russian forces yesterday as well. So there are significant changes then in and around this area. Now, while we move, we need to come into Pokrovsk. Now, we did report that Russian missiles hit the bridge that is just in here. Now, this bridge has been hit again and again by Russians, and it has actually come down completely. Now, bridges are incredibly difficult to actually bloody take down. They're built not to fall down. Anything that was built in the Soviet times was built for war as well. There was an obsession and a paranoia about war. So basements to bridges to a lot of buildings. This is the reason that they are very defendable, actually, is because they were built to a very high standard due to this. And that's the reason some of these are very difficult to take down. And it is geolocation of where that bridge is in here. And Russia is trying to cut some of the logistics of the Ukrainian forces in Pokrovsk in this direction. Now we're just going to push just south, Ugledar front. I'm calling this whole area down in here Ugledar front. We see a westerly push last week, and now we see a further westerly push here on Deep State by the Russians. Again, Salient is showing very, very similar, heading out towards Zolota Niva. So he's saying that this was abandoned by the Ukrainian army 8 days ago. So look, let's have an idea of where the positions are in here. We know these two, and there may have been a pullback to Zolota Niva or further back again in here. Gives us just more of an idea of where some things may be moving. So we have Avdiivka, then we have New York, Toretsk front. No change shown on this map today, not even in the grey zone shift, which we have to go back and forward to have a look and see. But then we see this map then here. This is the Salient map update. We have then, of course, New York, Toretsk, and during the last hours, Russian army made new advances inside the city of Toretsk up this road where they're pushing up here. In addition, last 4 days, Russian forces cleared completely the town of New York and made positions east and south of Nepelivkia. So remember that there was this area surrounded for a while, for like 2 weeks. Then the Ukrainians actually managed to break in and retake that, seen by the blue here. Russia is saying that that has then now been returned back. Again, wait and see on other different maps in here. Now we just move up. Now we see Chasiv Yar. The other day, we've seen a couple of changes. So we saw the crossing here at Kalinivka, across then the canal that splits the micro-district Kalinivka and Chasiv Yar itself, and then that expand out northwards a little bit as well. So we just come up to today to spread false bloody maps out there. Now, let's have a look here. We see the same sort of movement out to the north along Kalinivka Canal as we then saw yesterday on this map. So we can confirm that advancement right there. Now, we do have one more change, 2 more changes shown on this map. Sorry, this is Makivka. Now, we did speak about Syriac over the past few weeks and past days especially, has shown that Makivka has really come under control by the Russian forces. Today, no different. We are then seeing that. We come to Pashani. Now, we're seeing more of a fill-in out to the west here as well, trying to fill this further out. Now, there's a couple of things I want to show you in here as well. So we see EJ Shahid again talks of, here we go, that an FPV fires a drone. So this is one of those flamethrower drones we're seeing at Russian positions northwest of Pashani, Kharkiv region, and he gives where these Russian positions are, and then a geolocation of exactly where those positions actually are. And I went through and had a look myself. Now, I've actually put this on a map and then drawn it in just so it's easier. So these positions are right up in here. If it's positions, it should be likely in the red. So this area larger in here, Syriac does show that this is a much larger head of it in here. Now, Kupiansk, let's have a look at out in here and have a look at a geolocation and a video. I'll put the video in the Telegram if I remember. If I forget, remind me in the Telegram. Now, there is a video of a Russian guy like surrendering to 2 Ukrainian soldiers, but you see him in the beginning put a grenade under him. Now, if you've ever done any infantry training, you know if someone's dead or wounded, you never roll. Like if you're going to roll them, you either pull them with a rope or jump on their back and roll them. Because if someone puts a grenade under them with the bail and it flicks off, it can blow you up. And he did that, and then he stands up to try and like fight these guys, and then the grenade goes off after they then engage him. I've seen that video cropped in a way that it looks like just a blatant execution. Watch the full video. It is not. But the part I'm interested in, because that is not strategically important, the strategically important part is the geolocation of where this occurred. So let's have a look at the 6 ways is in here. This is right out here where this occurred. So let's have a look at where Sinkivka is. So this is sitting then right on the edge of where this green area is, way down in here. Way down in here that then occurred. So a way out of where this map is showing grey or green. Now, could it have been a recon element there behind the line? Yes, definitely has potential to have then been that. Now, did I miss that blue up here? No, I mustn't have. It's 2 weeks was up there. So, yeah, definitely some amount of movement in here. But, sorry, the reason that's important is if it's way out in here, very, very close then to Kupiansk. Mental note, put that in the Telegram to let you guys know, see what you guys think about this. Now, of course, we've seen Ukraine over the past past months, but really recently, the big push has been long-range strikes back into Russia, ATACMS, Storm Shadow Scalp. That is the peak, diplomatic action that Ukraine's trying to push through politicians. Is this Biden poised to approve Western use of long-range weapons in Russia? President Biden appears to be on the verge of clearing the way for Ukraine to launch a long-range weapons system deep inside Russian territory, as long as it doesn't use arms provided by the US. And this was today, so it seems like US is going to give the green light to see if UK and French weapons systems can be used, but don't use our ones. It's interesting because it's sort of like UK, France, your own people, bro. Do you. But of course, this is where you have the strategic power of America. Again, they can have so much play on what other countries then do. If America says jump, its allies sort of have to say how high. I know that pisses a lot of people off, but this is what you get when you've got a multi-trillion-dollar military and 300 million people. Apologies, it is just Australia's like that as well. We need to do that because our main defense is being allies with America. Now, many will go that this was the goal of Kursk, that, well, Kursk was here to prove that there's no red line, so then we can use these long-range strikes. I don't believe that was the goal. I don't think the goal is completely clear yet. I think there was multiple goals, but I will say I think it is a successful byproduct of Kursk is then the strikes may open up, that the ruling may get open so you can use those, but I think it's more of a byproduct than the initial goal, if that makes sense. Because I think if that was just the goal, there'd be other ways you'd go around that with other systems. Britain has already signalled to the US that it is eager to let Ukrainians use their Storm Shadow, which is the same Scalp long-range missiles, to strike at Russian military targets far from the Ukrainian border, 300 to 500-ish kilometres. But it wants explicit permission from Biden in order to demonstrate a coordinated strategy with the US and France, which makes a similar missile. American officials say Mr. Biden has not made a decision, but we'll hear from Mr. Starmer on Friday. So here, the proposal to use this, I think very likely this will go ahead. Again, there has been questions around the production of Scalp and Storm Shadow, as we haven't even seen those in use in the occupied territories now for some time. And there was actually more and more messaging that they were less and less effective against some of those AD systems as well as the time went on. And that is what we presume with any weapon you'll see. The effect in the beginning and a slight reduction as other systems can learn to counter it. How effective will it be? Again, I don't know, but it's going to need to be on large numbers, and simultaneous success. If it can't be one and then nothing, and the limited use already of Storm Shadow Scalp is, I think, very concerning. Even if this gets signed off, how many actually are there going to then be? This is why we believe Ukraine, the UK, and France were so big on getting Germany to sign off on the Taurus due to the limitations of just the capacity of development of the Storm Shadow and Scalp. Now, warnings from American intel agencies that Russia could respond to this by aiding Iran in targeting American forces in the Middle East. The US does play a global balancing act. The US, like Ukraine, needs to be just fully, what benefits Ukraine here right now, as they should be. America, being that leading dominant power of the world, they play a balancing act between bloody everyone. And that, of course, skews their some decisions made in some other areas. Again, the US has no friends or enemies. It has strategic interests, and that is very true of a power like the US. But I think Russia needs to be careful of that when it's trying to do moves with China too. China, I don't believe, has any friends or enemies. It has interests, and I think it can take Russia along for a ride there as well. On Thursday, White House officials insisted there was no imminent decision on the use of American-made ATACMS, but Biden has signalled that loosening of restrictions is coming. When he asked on Tuesday whether he was ready to grant the increasing insistent request from President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, we're working that out right now. So we may see the ATACMS come through as well. Now, it could well be his final acceleration of military aid to Ukraine. So the last time Biden makes a decision in here. Again, if Kamala, I believe, Harris is the leading in the polls at the moment. That said, this is the predictability, is it's going to be very, very similar governance between Biden and Harris. And that should be of concern too of, well, there's been a lot of limitations. Will those limitations somewhat continue also? On Thursday, President Vladimir Putin of Russia issued an unusually specific warning to the West, noting that the Ukrainians alone cannot operate long-range missiles because they require Western technical help from satellite GPS guidance. We know this from the German phone call that we do know the UK and France are heavily involved in many different facets of that launch process, everything of the Storm Shadow and Scalp systems as well. We do know that GPS can be jammed, and that can be very effective too. That GPS weapons actually have had a really real reduction in their effectiveness. Particularly the biggest one is the Excalibur artillery round, went from super effective to like more than 90% ineffective as well. Now these are of course more shielded than that, but still, that what Putin is saying is you are directly involved in the process of this, more so than handing over a shell. That the way that we will then see this. This will mean that NATO countries, the US and EU, European countries, are at war with Russia. And if this is the case, then bearing in mind the change in essence of the conflict, we will make appropriate decisions in response to the threats that will be posed to us. We've heard messaging like this before, but you can't just look at, oh, well, they're not going to strike this. You need to look at, well, but could they hand something to Iran or Subtech or oh my God, jet engine tech to China, North Korea, there's still that element. That's what the US is going to be trying to balance here. For the US, assessing how much to believe Mr. Putin has been a difficult task. As we've seen, the administration has discovered Mr. Putin appeared less eager to escalate the war than initially believed. It loosened the reins. So we have seen this escalation ladder be climbed by the US of where Russia said it would, but then we have seen some escalation on the other side in this as well. It'll be interesting to see what actually is the effect of those systems, as the US itself has said more than 90% of those bombers have now moved out of even the range of those. What effect will that have? Again, people are putting this as another game changer. No single system, and this is coming from the White House, from the Pentagon, no single system is going to just be then the silver bullet, Wunderwaffen, game-changing in this. And when you hear the word game-changing, run. Now, JD Vance, who potentially, if Trump were to get in, would be then the VP, has spoken to Sean Ryan here about what the peace proposal from Trump may actually look like. So we'll watch through this.
Ukraine wants this war to end. Europe, which, by the way, has underfunded this war while American taxpayers have been very generous to the Ukrainians, the Europeans want this war to end because it's jacking up their energy prices. So I think what this looks like is Trump sits down, he says to the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Europeans, you guys need to figure out what does a peaceful settlement look like. And what it probably looks like is...
So where would you settle? Where would you settle? Now, of course, we know where Russia want, the 4 oblasts and Crimea taken. Those 4, they don't occupy 100% of either of those 4 other than Crimea. So I split them apart. Ukraine want all the 1991 borders. Now, they are so far apart from each other. But if you have the 4 oblasts full occupation, annexation of those, plus Crimea here, and the complete liberation of all that territory by Ukraine here, if we actually take the percentage, it's further closer to where Russia's goal is, at least by percentage of land taken, than this. Again, both sides to achieve that militarily is going to be massively costly, and this is where JD Vance and through Trump were talking that there will be potentially some compromise if he was brought into power.
Something like the current line of demarcation between Russia and Ukraine, that becomes like a demilitarized zone. It's heavily fortified so the Russians don't invade again.
DMZ.
Ukraine remains its independent sovereignty.
So this is what we've spoken about, I think, of realistically, unless things change massively, you got to remember that any of these attacks, no matter if we say it's large and this and that, this line, since the end of 22, realistically, even if we zoom out to here, this is Avdiivka, this is Robotny Offensive, how much has this changed? Realistically, when we're talking the whole of Ukraine, Ukraine's a large country, very little. I think if you were to ask me, where does this end? I think realistically likely that this border we have now will be very similar to whatever we end up with in the future. Now, will this be an internationally recognised border? Will it be a demarcation line? Will it be X? Will it be Y? I can't tell you that, but I think the military build-up and recruitment of soldiers in Ukraine and the military build-up and recruitment of soldiers in Russia, I don't think neither is quick enough to achieve the goals of which have been set, at least from what I am seeing. If we look at 2025 offensives, what has changed in the Russian armed forces or the Ukrainian armed forces enough to then have a sweep through these other areas one way or the other? And I don't believe enough. And he's speaking
Russia gets the guarantee of neutrality from Ukraine. It doesn't join NATO. It doesn't join, some of these sort of allied institutions. And I think...
And then a guaranteed neutrality here to not join NATO. He says other institutions. We know back from the leaked documents that came out of Turkey that Russia was all right with Ukraine actually joining the EU. Now, of course, Ukraine wasn't happy with this and never went any further than that. But I think Ukraine will definitely join the EU. I think NATO is still don't know, because we don't know where this ends and how it will look. Maybe it'll be fully borders back. But again, I can't tell you, but if you asked me right now to make a prediction on where the front line will sit in an amount of time, when I look at the defensive works that Russia has built, I look at the areas that Ukraine has built, I look at how slow this has now moved for a year and a half, I'd struggle if I was a betting man to say that it's going to look much different than this if there was some negotiated settlement. It would sit like this, because where Putin is starting and where Ukraine is starting with what areas they want is so far apart, no one is going to be willing to give that up. But if the guns fall silent, well, that's the whole point, I guess, of negotiation, is it's negotiated, and it's a bit of give and take. But again, I don't know. I'm not saying that Ukraine should give that up. But I'm saying if there has to be a negotiation and the US is saying we need this, or most likely how it's going to look, I believe probably like it's looking at the moment. Now let's talk about wheat. Let's talk about icebreakers. Let's talk about global economies and climate change. I know, how does that line up? You're about to see. Now, what we have seen here is this is then a civilian ship said to be here, which carrying wheat, has been hit by Russian missiles in the Black Sea. Now, it's hard to get an idea exactly of how much damage actually got caused here. Zelensky has said a Russian missile against a wheat cargo bound for Egypt. Tonight, Russia launched a strike on ordinary civilian vessel used in the Black Sea right after it left Ukrainian territorial waters. Fortunately, there were no casualties, according to preliminary reports. Now, the Black Sea and Ukraine's ability to export through the Black Sea is absolutely critical for the Ukrainian economy. As we do know, Hungary, these Eastern European countries crack the shits at the amount of stuff coming out through their nations, undercutting their agricultural sector from Ukraine. So the Black Sea access is absolutely critical. As well, this may then rise insurance on these ships, therefore making the product more expensive. We're going to talk about the Houthis in here as well and why they're bombing some ships, or how they're bombing some ships down just before Suez Canal, Red Sea area in here, and how this then benefits Russia by limiting that, because of course Russia is a massive exporter of grain. Now we need to go back a little bit. We're going to put this all together. Why do Ukrainian food exports matter? When the war started, Ukraine's exports slumped. World prices for grains soared. The more grain that Ukraine has been able to supply global markets, the lower the prices have gone. So what this can tell you is then, if you're a major country that exports grain, it's supply and demand. The demand is always there. The demand for wheat and grain is increasing year to year due to many reasons. More meat in Asia, more biofuels, things like this. But for Russia, who's a massive exporter of this, if Ukraine's exports slump, world prices go up, Russia then is sitting on more cash reserves. And Australia actually sort of cashed in on this as a byproduct as well. So that's the first bit to look at here as well. How food prices have changed. I say if you're a major exporter, higher prices helps your cash reserves. This is why blowing up oil fields actually short-term can increase Russia's cash reserves. Long-term will limit it, but it can actually create a supply issue by increasing the cash on what is actually still held there as well. So we can see where the price goes up and down at the beginning of the war, where the Black Sea Initiative was unblocked and a dip, and then when Russia stepped back out of the Black Sea and then increased here too. If you're not tracking, don't worry yet. So this is just to show from an Australian government website here back on the 17th of November 2022. Australian exporters to benefit from long-term increase global demand for wheat. So again, these are the reasons why there's more global demand for it. This is how much it has gone up. But again, we also benefited if Ukraine, of course, a large exporter of wheat, we're an incredibly large exporter of wheat too. If they can't do it, ours goes up. Russia has the same byproduct of this. Australia wheat is less established in other growth markets, including Egypt, Nigeria, Ethiopia. However, these markets typically offer lower prices and incur higher shipping costs due to their distance from Australia. Again, 2024 with Houthis, the movement, if you go from Australia, you're going to go through there. The bangs on some of the other ships in there aren't going to help these prices, and even be able to insurances and all this. We'll look at a graph in a second. Increased wheat production from Russia will increase competition in global markets. Competition will be sharper if Russian farmers can produce higher quality wheat suitable for food manufacturing. However, long-term implications of the conflict in Ukraine may limit Russia's export capacity. We know Russia did have bumper crops last year. Now, let's have a look over this from Statista as well. That in 23-24 marketing year, Russia was the leading exporter of wheat flour and wheat products worldwide. Russia exported about 51 million metric tons that year. European Union came in second with 36.5 million metric tons of exports. Now, Australia's biggest problem here is we're just not close enough to some of the countries that these countries sell to, but close to some other massive populations as well. But you'll get a better idea. If you can limit this wheat, you can limit it from your adversary country, say Ukraine, you can limit their Black Sea fleet. Not only are you hurting their economy, you can actually increase then somewhat your own. So let's have a look at this. We see where Russia, this is historical, so don't take it too much into account, but it will make sense. Russia, and Ukraine, large exporters of wheat, large importers. We have countries like Egypt, Algeria, Nigeria, Morocco, of course, very close places through the Black Sea, out through Turkey, and then can go on to areas in Africa to export. We're large importers of this, where somewhere like Australia is going to be more interested in, say, Indonesia in here. But you get that idea that Russia and Ukraine have very, very similar markets for then their grain product. Now, we just need to jump onto a map here and have a look that out through the Black Sea, of course, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, these areas that we are talking about through the Black Sea, and then out through then Turkey as well. Now, we'll come on a little bit. Now, if you need to get your bearings, of course, Arabian Sea, Gulf of Dern, this is Yemen, this is where the Houthi rebels are, and then the Red Sea, where a lot of shipping is being really, really fucked around by the Houthis in here. Now, I've spoken about this before. The IRGC forces serving side by side the Houthis in Yemen, confirmed by US intelligence, and this is being reported by Iran International as well. So we know there is, a lot of friendship there as well. Now, this is a very interesting article. This came out about 13 hours ago. While the Kremlin is drifting close to the Houthi rebels in Yemen, the partnership between Russia and Iran, which is growing stronger as a result of military cooperation in Moscow's war against Ukraine, is reverberating in various parts of the world. In war-torn Yemen, is bringing about Moscow's reapproachment with pro-Iranian Houthi rebels. Now, remember, when we spoke about long-range strikes, one of the US's concerns is cementing and further increasing the relationship between Russia and Iran. Technology, trade, all of this. For a long time, Russia tried to maintain equal distance from all parties in the Yemen conflict, but for now, Russian military advisors are working in the Houthi-controlled capital Sana'a, and Moscow has not ruled out supplying weapons to the rebels. Remember, Iran can be a middleman here of some of these weapon systems. A lot of the weapon systems we're seeing that the Houthis are using are Iranian, but it would be easy to have an increase in technology flow through from a country that's been developing anti-ship missiles or other missiles for a hell of a long time down to Iran. And if that relationship between Iran and Russia got to the point where Russia gave Iran some nuclear system, that would change the entire Middle East like that, and the ability for other operations that the West has interest in that are occurring in the Middle East. Russia hasn't done that, but we know that's one of Iran's goals, was to have then some sort of nuclear weapon of mass destruction. In the past 2.5 years, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov has met with Houthi representatives at least 4 times. We see even TASS Russian media reporting about this, with meetings with then the Houthis in Yemen as well. Advisors from the Foreign Ministry of Intelligence, the GRU, are now working in Sana'a under the guise of humanitarian aid workers, according to then US intelligence out of the media. According to them, Iranian military instructors and other specialists have been operating in Yemen for many years under a similar scheme. And you can see how this can all link in with trade routes and shipping routes in a second. In addition, summer of 24, several US media outlets reported the Kremlin had been preparing to supply Houthis with weapons, but was forced to abandon the idea under pressure from the US. And Saudi Arabia. Moscow's position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts is indicative of where they sit when it comes to these allies of Iran that are operating, some proxies, some contractors in other countries, and where Russia has taken a firm stance on this as well. Having effectively adopted an anti-Israel position, the Kremlin is also trying to present itself as the leader of the global south, of all those who are dissatisfied with the position of the West, which has thrown its support behind Israel. This, in a lot of areas, I believe has been very, very successful. As the West, what has occurred in Israel-Palestine has been, I think, the worst the information and military action that has ever occurred for the West, and how the global South see the West. The amount of hypocrisy in this and that, I think, has taken back some of those relationships 50 years. And Russia, of course, has jumped on that to then move itself forward with, well, we are, the leader of those dissatisfied with these positions, and building a lot of relationships, allies there. So this is what we're looking at the moment. That if the Houthis hit through the Suez Canal, you're going around, of course, the Cape of Africa down in here. Now, of course, this is far more expensive. Not only is it another, say, 9 days, it's further. So you're longer both in days and miles. So increasing wages, more fuel, insurance is more expensive because it's just a longer, but the insurance has gone up through the Suez as well. There is a lot of worry about emissions of these massive diesel tankers. And of course, then it opens up the idea to other markets that if it's becoming long and more expensive to get it, well, we might buy it then from somewhere else. Now, these aren't the only two shipping routes that have come out when we talk about Belt and Road initiatives. We then see this, the North Sea route, a shipping highway. So this is the route through Suez Canal, but some 8,000 kilometres longer through here is if you were to come from, where are we actually coming from here? From Vladivostok, Busan area around in through Baltic into St. Petersburg through the North Sea. Now the passage is now feasible for 3 months of the year, but this might change due to climate change and a climate shift. So the ice may melt there. We're going to look at climate change in a second, but also we have seen Russia and China increasing massively the amount of icebreakers that they are making and building as well. And there's some tricky politics going in here about icebreakers too. Now, here we have Putin goes ahead with new nuclear icebreakers. Now, I believe too, I can't find it, but I was reading something on this channel the other day that Russia is building another 4 nuclear icebreakers at the moment, I believe. Now, keep this in mind. Russia is the only country that produces nuclear icebreakers. That is important. Now, if the icebreakers in here weren't important for control and more dominance in the north, well, we wouldn't see things like this. US and Finland form a trilateral icebreaking building pact to counter Russia and China in the Arctic, coming out in July 24, building these pact. But again, use of existing ones, which is there's very, very few of, or diesel. What Russia is doing trickily is putting in some restrictions around what can be used that benefits nuclear over diesel, as there are benefits there already, but to try and further their dominance in that area of the world for new shipping lanes to open. What we know that China and Russia keep messaging out is the rise of a multipolar world and multiple powers here. But China is further expanding its icebreaker fleet. The new Polar class vessel joined service in 24. We know China makes more ships than any other country in the world combined. We've seen new ones in 25, new ones in 27, and year-round scientific expeditions, geopolitical important polar regions, positioning China as a rising power in the Earth's frozen frontiers, which are going to become more and more important for a number of reasons. The North Sea route, Russia is attempted to exercise control of the North Sea route by instituting strict regulations on pollutant and shipping safety. Russia applies regulations that are significantly stronger than generally accepted international standards. These include mandatory insurance and icebreaker escorts, both of which are expensive and exclusively controlled by Russia. Only country to make. Then, of course, nuclear-powered icebreakers, and of course, just that area of the world is exactly where Russia is as well. So you can see why they have this as exclusive. But let's talk about these restrictions a little bit more. Russia's regulations cater specifically to nuclear-powered icebreakers compared to diesel icebreakers, that they can operate over extended periods without refueling. So this is just a bonus of nuclear energy that for year-round navigation in the harsh winters where they just need more power. But we have seen in this where they speak about that applies regulations significantly stronger than generally accepted, that because then we see that nuclear-powered icebreakers produce no carbon emissions during operation, then diesel icebreakers, if your adversary only has diesel, you put in massive regulations around pollutants. Next thing, you're the only ones operating there, maintaining your exclusivity on this. Now, what I will say is good business is not always hybrid warfare. It's good business. But hybrid dominance is always good business. Does that make sense? It goes one way, not the other. And this is a bit of column A, a bit of column B. Icebreakers rely on logistical support for fuel in the road Arctic if you're a diesel one. So if you have to have the infrastructure here and refueling and all this, then nuclear ones don't need it. Therefore, then these pollutants, all of this and that comes into the restrictions that they've put on there as well. Now, I've spoken about this before. Climate change, most likely from what I see in this, will benefit Russia more than a lot of other areas on Earth. Now, what we have seen is that Russia has a massive amount of land, but so much of it is not able to be farmed. It's not arable. So we will see potentially an expansion of arable land, longer growing seasons, therefore more dominance in the global grain markets, which there already is a large dominance, at least in exporting of that will become more important as more places in Africa start eating more meat, biofuels, things like this. And of course, that comes into more than economic sorry, I'm getting so many calls, opportunities here as well. But this can bring with it extreme weather events and water stress as well. So it can turn back some of this. But I remember watching, and this had nothing to do with the war in Ukraine, that about one of the best things to happen to Russia may actually be climate change or climate shifts. Now, whether you believe climate change is man-made or cyclical through, doesn't really matter, but we know things are warming up towards the North Pole, therefore may actually have more arable land here too. And I believe that Russia and China are trying to get their head start on opening up that North Sea route, not only building the icebreakers to move through, but maybe limiting and changing markets that countries have and where ones are shipping through, with using some proxies to maybe blow up a couple of ships here and there down in the Red Sea. Does that all line up? Let me know if I'm an idiot or not. Legends, have a fantastic day. Sorry this is so long, but I enjoy the research. I enjoy talking to you guys. I enjoy sort of getting my head around all of this, and we'll see how this moves on into the future. Have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.